Hi, guys. Welcome to the Seraphiend podcast. We are fiending for more, and we're fiending about Ricky Gervais and Afterlife Season 1. We are now discussing Episode 5. So if you haven't gotten to Episode 5, skip this. Go back to our review of wherever you're at in the series. Where we're beginning is he's watching the video of Lisa, and Lisa tells him and reminds him to keep being funny. And you know, I think he protects his pain with humor. And this is when he goes to see his little nephew playing in the elementary schoolyard. And his little nephew's very sad because he got bullied.
Yeah.
And he goes and he threatens a little kid with a hammer. And that's the hammer from the mugging.
Yep.
So when you first saw that, I laughed my ass off.
Yeah.
But then I also thought, what if that was my kid?
Exactly. I just felt like if that's a hard situation because I know when I have kids, I'm going to be very protective. And if they're like getting bullied, I've learned because my mom was always like that. She would try to fight my battles for me.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, it led to me like maybe not trusting myself to handle my own problems.
Yeah.
And so you have to, that would be first instinct is to go up to someone. I would never threaten a kid with a hammer. But he's in such a dark place. Of course he's going to do that.
But again, it's almost like you're making your kid into a weaker
Yes.
potential asshole.
Yes.
You know, like if you've raised such a wimpy kid that you've got to do all the battle. But then in the next breath, you know, I also thought about the mother that was, you know, of the kid teasing George. And in some ways, like I get like, I want to kick people's asses when I see them treat others like, so I get it, the rage, but he's also like 8 years old.
Yeah, totally. I know you have to, kids can be super duper duper mean, but there's better ways to handle it than to
threatening them with a hammer. Yeah, probably not, Tony.
Call. Yeah.
Bad call. So he shares, so, you know, after he basically says he'll murder the kid,
Yes.
then he goes to see his dad over at the senior home. And he actually tells his dad about the kid. And Emma's like overhearing this and was like, oh, my God. And he defends himself by saying like, you know, all I need is my dog.
Yeah.
You know, and then she talks about her cat. And they have this cute little exchange.
Yes.
And then the one thing he does say in this scene is he said, you know, it's my responsibility for my dog and my dad that keeps me going.
Once my dog's gone, then he kind of just stopped at that point. Like I don't really have anything to lose.
Yeah. I've never, you know, I you know, you see like old people with their dogs.
Yeah.
And you see them by themselves. And I've always wondered, like, you know, with my own dogs and Johnny, like, I can't imagine, like, first of all, this show, you know, makes me understand my husband more and more because, like I said, he lost his first wife.
Yeah.
So for me, I like wanted to get into the psyche of it. And then I think about like going on living, like, what is it? What keeps you going? And then these guys, I mean, you see how I treat my dogs. I treat them like my children.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just it was just really a sweet moment and a vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like a softening there.
And they connected a little bit in that moment on like before their exchanges were very sarcastic
and banter.
Yeah, but this was like a more serious connection.
And you can see him wanting more.
Yeah.
But like I don't think he was quite ready to give her more. So it like ends. And then he goes back to work. Like he's always kind of going back and forth. Like he drops in at work and kind of goes back. And so the podgy guy, Lenny, he's happy about his new girlfriend. And he's telling like the secretary, like, who's literally like this across from him. And he's like, tell me when my bird gets in. And people are like, you'll see her.
Yeah, call me when she gets here. And yeah, I was like, okay, Mr. Important.
He's got a new chick.
Oh yeah.
And like it's funny because his brother-in-law pulls him in the office to let him know. This is where we were in the timeline, I think, where it's first
Julian.
Yeah.
He says he said something, I don't remember how it got brought up, but about Julian overdosing.
Yeah, because he delivers the paper for the Tambury Gazette. And I think somehow the police alerted him or he got a heads up for it.
Yes. And then Tony is like, well, I gave him the money. And he was like, what do you mean you gave him the money? And there's kind of like like his brother-in-law is saying basically, I don't want to know that.
Yeah.
You don't tell me right now that you gave him the money to buy these drugs. Like, kind of like, you're better than that. Why would you do that? That's like assisted suicide.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you really understand, you know, when you're with certain types of people and belief systems. I think I've seen it come out a lot of times when I've talked about abortion with more conservative people, or you see it with people who have dealt with someone who is really suffering in their death and pain. And, you know, my parents have made the joke that, you know, if I'm drooling in my chair, I mean, and it pains me to say it, that, you know, because my dad was diagnosed with ALS, and, you know, they've always said, you know, that they would assist each other because they wouldn't want to be a burden on each other, and that they wanted to live with dignity. Yeah. And it's crazy because it's hard. Like, that was a hard moment for me because my parents brought me up. So for me, I've always had this like live with dignity and don't be a burden on people. Yeah. And in some ways, like, Tony assisted him in not having a choice, because actually I feel like Julian could have lived if.
Oh, totally.
I think he totally could have lived.
I think that I think it was in his head, and he was very, very depressed because of his girlfriend. Yeah. And he didn't have the resources to get help for it. Yeah. So I totally agree.
I wonder if they'll revisit that, like, guilt in season 3, because I don't even know. I mean, I'm such a guilty person that if I gave money and they ended up dying, like, I don't know. Yeah. That was a tough one.
It was.
So then, like, he goes out of that tough conversation right back into happy couple with Lenny and June. Yeah. And he's really mean at first, like to a point where poor June is like, fuck you. He's the hottest guy with his chubby skin. And what did she say? She said his warmth or something.
His skin is like a baby. Yes. Skin is like a baby. I love it. Yeah. He's trying to, like, put some kind of, almost not doubt, but something like that in her, like basically questioning her why he likes him. He's like, well, have you seen the fat on the back of his neck? She's like, the fat roll. He's like, no, but we'll get there. Yep.
Then he refers to as a pug roll. It's so funny, so mean.
Yeah, just like pointing out the negative points of Lenny and kind of like, why would you ever date him? Yeah. And then she kind of just like shuts him down, and she's like, I love him for him. And Tony kind of realized what he did, and his face kind of changed, like, oh, because Tony was in love with his wife, and like, they're not perfect either.
No, not at all. So, you know, and then you see that everyone's happy for him. And then it's funny because it almost gives him a little burst of energy and courage, and he goes back to the senior home. Yeah. And then he's like, because, you know, he had that connection with her, and then he sits her down, and then radio silence, and she's like, what the fuck?
He's like, well, that's all I got. It was cute because when you first start liking someone, you're like very conscious of how you look. Yeah. And it kind of like pans to him, and he's like kind of swiping the sides of his hair and like making, like, sitting up straighter and waiting for her to walk by. And then when she gets in there, he asks her to sit down, and they're so cute. He's like, well, that's all I got for you. And she's like, okay. He's like, go back to work now. And then it pans to her in the hallway, and she's kind of just like, oh, it's cute. Like, just a little giggle. But I love how their relationship so far is unfolding.
Yeah, it just unravels in a really beautiful way. And and again, that banter between them is now turning into something that's real. So, you know, then he's walking the dogs. I love all the scenes, the interweaving with Brandy. Yeah. Like, she's like his little choo-choo train, like getting him through each day. And then he goes to his house, and his mailman Pat is always reading his mail, and he sends him that postcard. And again, it's this, like, he's like a swinging pendulum where it's like he has his highs and he's got his lows. It's like this bipolar depression of like, well, I'm still gonna make him understand. Yeah. But in some ways, it was kind of sweet because I don't think Pat gets talked too much.
No, I don't think so either.
Pat's like, I don't know.
And it was kind of, he got a little bit attention, and Tony noticed something that he did. And I totally agree. And I'm excited to see, you kind of let me in on a little insight that his character is someone that's like the way that his character is unfolds through the next season or so. He's a big part, so I'm excited to see that. But yeah, that was just funny.
It's kind of funny when everybody gets their moment in the sun, and he's one of those characters that I was like, oh, and that made me think about my own mailman.
Yeah,
He always is like Mr. Smiley, and he's always such a gentleman, and so many people you ignore and have jobs that just kind of are service, or you're used to them, or they're just there, you take them for granted.
Yeah,
and it just made me think about things very differently. So then he goes back in the pendulum zone because he has this bad interaction with his psychiatrist. He's telling him about how much, he hates people who's yawning and chomping ice and shuffling their feet. And then the psychiatrist, true to form, is a total jerk and yawns.
Yeah.
And it just sets him off again. And then he's going back to work and the Save the Children people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That whole interaction, he calls him Four Eyes, the kid.
I know. It was like, and then he ends up giving the money. So the man is trying to get people to donate money for Save the Children, and he's kind of guilt tripping Tony.
Yep.
Into doing it, and Tony is not having that.
No,
he doesn't want anyone guilt tripping him. And then at the end, he ends up giving the money to the lady for the cancer.
It's funny
research.
because he always, and that's where with Julian, it's like I feel like he's constantly like shaking shit up, and then he's asking for redemption in some way. It's so interesting. So then Brian comes in and he's trying to blackmail being in the paper. That's the hoarder guy, who's creepy, and they go to his house and it's disgusting. Oh my God, have you ever watched Hoarders?
I haven't seen the show, but I know of it.
Oh my God, I can't even handle 5 minutes of the show. I mean, there's like roaches and mice, and Tony literally asks him, why don't you kill yourself?
Yeah.
And he says, suicide's too good for him. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, he's really in deep pain.
Why do you think, so he goes with Sandy and Lenny to go, why do you think Sandy stays to get the story? Because I mean, I would be creeped out if I was there.
Sandy really wants to prove herself, and she's like ready to take on the challenge, and she's like, I want to stay here. I think she's also like eager to learn.
Yeah.
And like with Tony, he kind of was like the main person on that little excursion. So with him leaving, she's like, I want to learn more. I want to like take charge of this. I want you to have respect for me. And she I think she believes that there's something, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
So she's trying to deep dive into that. And I think I had respect for her. She never complains. She's such a sweetheart.
God, she's in her eyes. Like this
gorgeous.
Actress is out of hand. I mean, just beautiful and sweet and great voice. So then, then the brother-in-law takes him in again. And this is definitely like intense because, they just got done with the puppet hoarder, and he's again, a little bit like, know, and then he finds out about George being threatened with a hammer.
Yeah.
And, or he threatens for George with the hammer, but I don't think he knows yet. He doesn't know yet. Like he tells him like someone like is threatening or like a bully.
The school called his brother-in-law.
Yeah, and
told him that I think they were just kind of alerting him.
Yeah,
but he knew it was Tony. Because he knew
you think
about.
You knew it then?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
He totally did because he
knew the hammer. God, that's fun.
He knew he had the hammer, and when he calls Tony in, he like knew. Yeah. Because Tony was like, "What you mean?" He's like, "I already know it's you. Like you don't have to tell me this." Blah blah blah.
And it's compounded with Julian.
Yes.
So it's like I don't want to know these horrible things.
Yeah.
About someone I care about.
Exactly. So then at that point he's like, if I have to choose between the safety of my son and being there for you, I will 150 times over choose my son. And you can see that at that point that Tony just kind of realized the damage he's causing, and you see a real side to him because he says, I'm in pain. Yeah.
It's a really cool moment because it pretty much wraps up the episode because the brother gives him an ultimatum, and then all of a sudden he is like, I can't see. He's literally saying you can't see your nephew.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna click the switch.
Yeah.
And there's this empty snow globe. He goes out in the office again and there's this whole conversation about like what keeps her going. And she can't think of anything
Kath.
except having a laugh.
Yeah.
And she brings up
Kevin Hart.
Yep, Kevin Hart. And it's so crazy when they talk. They have this moment there, and he's kind of seeing the emptiness in her.
Yeah, because she couldn't think of what she loved.
Totally.
She's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "What do you mean? What do I mean?
Yeah.
What do you love?"
And the episode really ends on that note to where he is again like so torn. He goes to the graveyard. Him and Anne have this really profound exchange where she's telling him, it's not about you. It's about the people in your life and future generations. And she gives this beautiful analogy about planting trees for the ones that you won't experience the shade in.
Yeah.
And, then it just ends with everyone kind of leaving the office after this profound exchange. And you see everybody going back, to their lives. And Sandy shows him her story. Mm-hmm. It's like having hope for someone, like putting the exclamation point on it all.
Yeah. And her story was really good.
Yeah.
And she found the story for him. And we don't know yet what the story is, but
it was a good episode. And then it really ends with hope, because who doesn't have hope in puppies?
Yeah.
Puppies. And him, the video where he shows Brandy being given to his wife Lisa for the first time, but they don't let you have the moment quite, because they end on Daphne outside Julian's garage.
Yeah.
So you're torn. So episode 5, I mean, it was a heart tugger.
It was, but there's also, like you said, a lot of bright spots, and you can start to see the characters, at least in Tony's sake, kind of shift in a different direction than what he was. In the downward spiral, you can see him start to like understand the damage that he's causing.
Yeah.
So,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love this show. Well, that was episode 5, guys. We got one more episode in the season. Stay tuned and click and subscribe to the Seraphiend podcast.